Hi guys, back for part 5, the income tax hoax. This part will be the most, or usually is the most emotionally charged subject in America. When people start talking about it, things get heated and emotional. And I think it's because the fact is that it's dealing directly with your money. Let me say this. I don't understand the attacks on people like Wesley Snipes. I know Willie Nelson's gone through it. Many people have gone through it. The horrible way they did the heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Louis, back in the day. I just remember, and I talk about this. I have it on my YouTube channel on one of those, on one of my videos about Wesley Snipes, and just the comments. You know, let's see you fight your way out of this one, Blade. When he was convicted on like 3 counts, he had beat most of them. I just don't understand it, because it's like, so why are people so hateful and spiteful about other people being put in jail illegally or whatever for tax, quote unquote? They call it tax evasion, or I don't get it. There is no law that you have to pay taxes, and I'm going to show it to you and prove it to you. Whether you accept that or not, it's up to you. But that's what it is. I just don't get it. Why people are so mean. And what's your point and purpose? I just recently came under attack. And when I read this stuff and stuff I get from people, it's always anonymous, or maybe they're using a fake name. I use my real name. I am who I am. I'm not hiding from anyone, because I don't fear any man or woman. You know, it's like this person, not to get into it, just recently attacked me about the whole UCC code and this and that, and I had to show the person what it actually says and how it applies, and just the bottom line it comes down to, so what's your point? What's your attack on me for? What are you trying to prove? What is it that you feel that I'm such a horrible person that I'm trying to liberate, educate the American people on how they've been lied to and tricked into economic slavery or contractual slavery? What's your point of your attack? Are you for sovereignty and for the freedom of all people, or are you for the enslavement and control of all people? There's no one little bit or nothing. You're either pregnant or you're not. I don't get it. So anyway, I had to put that question out to that person and just come out bottom line. So what's your point? What is it that you want to say? You're accusing me of all this. Now I'm defending myself and explaining to you the law and how it's to be applied according to the law, or to you know, the statutes or what have you. And your rebuttal was weak. And I've never heard back from you once I told you that. So what's your point? Who are you for? The people or the Illuminati? You're on one or the other side. You can't be on both. So anyway, if you want, and if you're watching this video, hit me up on that. I'm very curious to know. Let me get into this. First of all, let me state this. I believe in paying any lawful and constitutionally imposed taxes to support our nation. I believe that labor is the most sacred property of a free people and cannot be taxed. To quote the courts, and I do have this case, but I forget where it is, the exact case, but anyway, to quote the courts, they said, the individual, unlike the corporation, cannot be taxed for the mere privilege of existing. The corporation is an artificial entity which owes its existence and chartered powers to the state. The individual's rights to live and own property are natural rights, for the enjoyment of which an excise cannot be imposed. Income tax is voluntary. Income legally refers to privileged activities and not to compensation for your labor. You must understand this, people. It's crucial. I'm going to read to you some of this. I didn't really want to have to read much to you, but I got to. I have no choice, because you have to hear what I'm saying, or what is being said, not my writings, but to put it all into perspective. The IRS has no external jurisdiction within the 50 states. The IRS is limited by the Constitution solely to the 63 square miles of the District of Columbia and federal possessions such as Guam, Puerto Rico, the American Samoa, the U.S. Virgin Islands, etc. There's a couple more. The term United States has 3 legal meanings, and that by law, one of the 3 entities called the United States is a foreign country to the 50 states united. And that although the people of the states have given this municipal corporation limited jurisdiction over their states, it has no paramount legal jurisdiction over the individual citizens of the 50 states, except by individual voluntary application and contract. Our labor is our property and a natural, unalienable right, as has been clearly established in the courts. In the case of Butchers Union Company versus Crescent City, the court said this: the property which every man has is his own labor, as it is the original foundation of all other property. So it is the most sacred and inviolable. The patrimony of the poor man lies in the strength and dexterity of his own hands, and to hinder his employing this strength and dexterity in what manner he thinks proper without injury to his neighbor is a plain violation of the most sacred property. If the government is allowed to place a tax on a natural right, it can then raise that tax to the point where that right is effectively been destroyed. That is tyranny. The IRS collects taxes on income, and the Senate has been empowered to collect a tax on incomes from whatever source derived by the so-called 16th Amendment. But it has nothing to do with your wages. People who work for a living are compensated in the form of wages. Wages are non-income. They are compensation for labor, which the courts have affirmed is property protected as a natural right. Income is an accounting profit or gain that can be derived from investing your wages. But don't expect the IRS to point this out to you. For a legal opinion, it is always your best bet to quote court cases, preferably U.S. Supreme Court cases. Why? Because that's the highest court of the land. In the case of Oliver versus Halstead, 1955, the court ruled that there is a clear distinction between profit and wages, or compensation for labor. Compensation for labor cannot be regarded as a profit within the meaning of the law. The word profit, as ordinarily used, means the gain made upon a business or investment, a different thing altogether for mere compensation for labor. The 16th Amendment does not authorize a direct tax on the wages of individual, but an excise or indirect tax on income derived from certain privileged activities, like the limited liability enjoyed by corporations. Between the years of 1913 and 1915, fewer than 2 million Americans volunteered to file income tax returns. Back then, they knew it was a tax only on corporations and certain licensed professions. The next income tax the American people were asked to volunteer for was the withholding or victory tax levied during World War II. The central banks, with a lot of help from the Congress, who they bought out and pay to this day to keep the American people ignorant on subjects like this, used the patriotism of the American people to further enslave them. And of course, the victory tax was not allowed to die natural death after World War II. So by 1946, the bankers had their hands deep in the American people's pocket of individual Americans by withholding directly from their paychecks, using the war as a pretext. Despite this, it should be understood that no matter what statutes, codes, or regulations the federal government creates, it has by law no authority to impose a direct tax on individual Americans unless we give it individual permission by some color of contract, or if we are under some form of martial law, which is what they're going to be doing next. The money interests knew this and have engineered the federal income tax system based on voluntary compliance. Do you get it now? I'm so sick and tired over these last 20 years hearing the ignorance of the American people, or many of the American people, on this subject. Did that just clear up basically everything for you? Do you get it now? And I'm not being condescending to you. I'm just very sick of this and tired of the ignorance of us all. It's time to wake up. And as I'm ending my workshop and getting close to the end, I've got to be thorough and I've got to be hard. Because this BS has got to stop. These criminal judges, lawyers, politicians, and so forth are driving me nuts. And you're believing everything that they're telling you when they're sitting there lying to you to your face. Don't put me in your drama and in your BS. Not going to play your game anymore. This is my message to you, the Illuminati. Let me finish this up. So what did they do? They engineered the income tax bullcrap around the 13th Amendment, which says in section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment, for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So what did they do? These people, who are not dummies by any means, they're very intellectual in certain aspects. They engineered the income tax around another type of slavery called voluntary servitude. Economic slavery. Voluntary servitude is an ancient and established concept. It was the way serfs became subject to their lords during feudal times in England and other European countries. It was a way for free men to earn a living at the time when property was held by a select few, and thus anyone who wanted to farm and support their families had to first agree to be subject to the Lord of the land. The forefathers hated this concept and designed the Constitution to exclude titles of nobility, making all Americans sovereign, but sovereigns without subjects, that is to say, equals among equals, peers at law. The fraudulent 14th Amendment turned the intent of the founders on its ear. by making voluntary servitude a requirement for former black slaves to gain any of the rights already guaranteed to free-born state citizens. Not convinced yet? Still you don't believe it? Can't be. The government would never lie to me. Never. No. In their own publications. Not mine. Not Kev's. IRS. Let me give you two things. First of all, I have seen the book. I regret not buying it when I had the chance. Regardless, here's what it says. Here's two more evidence of things in the IRS. On the cover of the IRS Confidential Handbook for Special Agents, it read or reads, "Agents, our tax system is based on individual self-assessment and voluntary compliance. The material contained in this handbook is confidential in character. It must not, under any circumstances, be made available for persons outside this service." Why the secrecy? If it's a law, we are supposed to follow the law. Why is all this confidential secrecy? Because it's a fraud. The IRS 1993 1040 Easy Form, an instruction booklet in which Margaret Milner Richardson, who was at that time the IRS Commissioner, stated on page 3, "Dear taxpayer, thank you for making this nation's tax system the most effective system of voluntary compliance in the world." There it is. I didn't make it. The next year, 1994, 1040 Easy Book. Oh, they didn't say that this time. They took it out. Oh, Margaret said, "We got so many complaints and people started saying, 'What's going on here?' We can't write that anymore." Wake up. Wake up. You ready for more? I got more. I got lots more. Got so much, it's just unbelievable. I ain't even gonna read that. I was. No point. This is an interesting thing. USA Today, Friday, July 7th, 2015, almost 15 years ago. This was the original paper. You can go look it up. Dear We the People. You know who that is, right? I taught you that, right? This was a remonstrance of the tax thing. I'll just read a little bit of it because it's a lot, but I'm just trying to figure out what part to read to you. Most citizens are not required to file an income tax return. The 16th Amendment income tax to the Constitution is a fraud. If you file, you waive your Fifth Amendment rights. Okay, I'm just going to read part of this to you. You can go look it up. Go do research. I do it, and I spent many hours, months, and years doing it. You need to do it too. That's how you educate yourself. I'm going to read this, okay. These are the major points expressed in a remonstrance that was hand-delivered to leaders of the three branches of the federal government on April 13th, 2000 by a group of citizen delegates representing all 50 states. These grievances concerned alleged illegal operation of the federal income tax system and the IRS. The remonstrance was signed by thousands of citizens and was delivered as part of an event sponsored by We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education, a non-for-profit corporation dedicated to research and education in matters of taxation and governance. Right off, let me say this to you, or let me read this. The main propositions of the remonstrance are: the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the Income Tax Amendment, was fraudulently and illegally proclaimed to be ratified in 1913. Exhaustive legal research from both state and national archives document conclusively that the amendment did not even come close to being legally approved by the required number of states. The courts have refused to hear this issue. Defendant, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right, but Stahla, S-T-A-H-L. Stahla's claim that ratification of the 16th Amendment was fraudulently certified constitutes a political question because we could not undertake independent resolution of this issue without expressing lack of respect due coordinate branches of government. U.S. versus Stahla, 1986, 792, F2D, 1438. See? Take this stuff to the courts, and they say, well, it's a political question or issue. No, it's a fraud issue. Fraud. Because two gentlemen, patriots by the name of Red Beckman and Bill Benson, spent 2 years of their life going to every single state in the United States of America to look up, at that time, the ratification of the 16th Amendment. What did they find? As you just heard, it didn't even come close to the required 3/4 of the state's approval. Philander Chase Knox was a fraud. The state attorney, or whatever his position was, lied and said that it was ratified, when in fact it wasn't. And the courts refused to hear this issue? And the American people aren't up in arms over this? This is what we're talking about. They've tried, and other people have tried, to sit down with this ridiculous government to talk about this. And like I told you, this is an emotion charged subject because I've had to spend so many of my years in this BS fighting these stupid, idiot, Masonic controlled government people. And I'm tired of it. When they tried to sit down with the government agreed to sit down and to talk to the American people about the legality of the income tax. Do you want to hear what they said? Do you? Listen to this. And this is long after they agreed that they were going to do this. However, on June 2nd, the White House reneged on the promises it made during the April 13th meeting. As with 3 previous conferences, the government has again refused to debate the grievances. Jason Furman told Robert Schultz, the legality of the income tax is not a high priority item at the White House, and we will not participate in any conference on the subject. We have reached the point where the government evasion must be regarded as an omission. Thank you very much. I'm not even going to do it anymore right now. I was, but just you hearing that should be enough to make you sit there and say to yourself, it's time. I was going to read some more stuff, but you know what? there ain't no point. Because if you don't get it by now, you're not going to get it. Howard Freeman, back to the UCC code. Stated this to the person who attacked me on this. Another myth here, right? Using the code with the IRS. If the IRS sends you a notice of deficiency, this is called a presentment. In the UCC, a presentment in the Uniform Commercial Code is very similar to the common law. But first, we must understand just how this works in the common law. Suppose I get a man's name from a phone book, someone I have never met, and I send him a bill or invoice on a nice letterhead which says, for services rendered, $10,000. I send this by certified mail to him at the address taken from the phone book. The man has to sign for it before he can open it, so I get a receipt that he received it. When he opens it, he finds an invoice for $10,000 and the following statement. If you have any questions concerning this bill or the services rendered, you have 30 days to make your questions or objections known. Of course, he has never heard of me, so he just throws the bill away and assumes that I am confused or crazy. At the end of 30 days, I go to court and get a default judgment against him. He received a bill for $10,000, was given 30 days to respond. He failed to object to it or ask any questions about it. Now, he has defaulted on the bill and I can lawfully collect $10,000. That's common law. The UCC works on the same principle. The minute you get a notice of deficiency from the IRS, in anyone else state, you return it immediately with a letter that says, this presentment above is dishonored. Kevin Pertee, your name, has reserved all of his rights, or her, of course, if you're a female, under the Uniform Commercial Code at UCC 1-207. I've already told you that's been changed. This should be all that is necessary, as there is nothing more they can do. In fact, I recently helped someone in Arizona who received a notice of deficiency. The man sent a letter such as this, dishonoring the presentment. The IRS wrote back that they could not make a determination at that office, but were turning it over to the collections department. A letter was attached from the collections department which said they were sorry for the inconvenience they had caused him and the notice of deficiency has been withdrawn. So you can see that if it's handled properly, these things are easily resolved. Why do you think the government, the IRS, goes after rich people or famous people a lot? Some people say because they got the money. They got all the money. They're not worried about us. The hell they're not. They come after small people just as much. You just don't hear about it on the news. It's a scare tactic to scare you. If they're coming after Wesley Snipes, he's worth millions. What are they going to do to me? They're coming after him. He's Leona Helmsley. She's worth billions. What are they going to do to little poor old me? They do that to scare you into paying something that you have no legalities on paying. When the IRS loses big cases or small cases or any case, do you hear about it? No. Why? Does your local news say, hey, the IRS got their butts beat today. We're happy to report something good for the people for a change? Why do you think that is, folks? Why do you think that is? I'm going to read to you this because I want you to hear this because it makes me so proud to this day. It wasn't a U.S. Supreme Court case. It wasn't a huge court case. And like I said, a lot of my information, I won't say it's older or, you know, by no means I want to say outdated. But there may be some newer cases, better cases now that have gone. Like I said, I've been out of this for a while, but it's enough. I believe is still very, very important information and valid information. So remember something, because I've had these fools in court. Well, Mr. Bertin is quoting a court case from 80 years ago. Well, the court case is still valid. It doesn't matter. It's still valid. What difference does it make if it was last year, 5 years ago, 50, 80, 100 years ago? If it was never overturned or overruled, it's still a valid case. Anyway, this was a case in Tennessee. IRS loses big case in Tennessee back in '93. Bet you didn't hear about it. A not guilty verdict came in the Eastern District of Tennessee in the case of U.S. versus Lloyd R. Long, CR 1-93-91. The verdict came on October 15, 1993. This was an amazing case involving the income tax. A Chattanooga jury agreed with the argument by Long that the income tax is actually an excise tax and only applies to certain classes of people. Nationally prominent attorney Lowell Beecraft in Huntsville, Alabama, assisted by attorney Russell J. Leonard of Sewanee, Tennessee, defended Lloyd R. Long of Decherd, Tennessee. Long was charged with willful failure to file income tax returns for 1989 and 1990. In presenting the case for the IRS, the government represented by Assistant U.S. Attorney Curtis Collier, assisted by Special Agent Michael Greasley of the IRS, declared that Long had grossed income in excess of $49,000 for each year, and that he willfully failed to file income tax returns. The defense admitted that Long had an income in excess of $49,000 for each year in question and that he did not file a return. He then proceeded to prove to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that he was not liable for an income tax, nor was he required by law to file. Defense testimony showed a case titled Broshaber versus Union Pacific Railroad, wherein it was the unanimous decision of the U.S. Supreme Court that the 16th Amendment did not give Congress any new power to tax any new subjects. It merely tried to simplify the way in which the tax was imposed. It also showed that the income tax was in fact an excise tax on corporate privileges and privileged occupations. The defense then brought out a case entitled Flint versus Stone Tracy, wherein an excise tax was defined as a tax being laid upon the manufacture, sale, and consumption of commodities within the country, upon licenses to pursue certain occupations, and upon corporate privileges. Mr. Long's attorneys also brought out a case entitled Simmons versus Ahern's, Arehns, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, wherein the court ruled that the income tax was neither a property tax nor a tax upon occupation of common right, but was an excise tax. The defense then brought out a case entitled Redfield versus Fisher, wherein the court ruled that the individual, unlike the corporation, could not be taxed for the mere privilege of existing, but that the individual's right to live and own property was a natural right upon which an excise cannot be imposed. Defense also pointed to a couple of studies done by Congressional Research Services that shows the income tax is an excise. Next, defense pointed out that in Tennessee Supreme Court case Jack Cole versus Commissioner, the court ruled that citizens are entitled by right to income or earnings, and that right could not be taxed as a privilege. In another Tennessee Supreme Court case, Korn versus Fort, the court ruled that individuals have the right to combine their activities as partnerships, and that this is a natural right, independent of antecedent of government. The prosecution did not challenge or attempt to refute any of these cases cited or the conclusion of the courts. Defense brought out in testimony the fact that nowhere in the entire Internal Revenue Service Code was anyone actually made liable for the income tax. They show that in the IRS own Privacy Act notice, only 3 sections were cited, and that none of these sections made anyone liable for the tax. They also proved that this was not an oversight by showing that the alcohol tax was worded so clearly that no one could misinterpret who was liable for the alcohol tax. Prosecution did not challenge or attempt to refute this point, nor were they able to show a statute that made anyone liable for the income tax. Defense then presented the mission statement on the IRS stating that the income tax relied upon voluntary compliance, and a statement from the head of the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax Division of the IRS, which in essence showed that the income tax was 100% voluntary, as opposed to the alcohol tax, which is 100% mandatory. Mr. Long stated that in 1989 he knew that the income tax was in fact an excise tax, and that he was not enjoying any corporation, and that income or earnings from the exercise of common right could not be taxed as an excise or otherwise, and that nowhere in the IRS code was he made liable for the tax, and that the income tax was voluntary. Long then stated he was so intimidated by the IRS that he filed and paid his voluntary assessment. He then began a series of letters to the IRS explaining that he had no license or privileges issued to him by the federal government. He asked for direct answers to simple questions such as, am I required to file federal income tax returns? And am I liable for federal income taxes? The IRS never gave a direct answer to any questions. Instead, they inferred and insinuated and extrapolated and beat around the bush and generally avoided answering. So Mr. Long testified that he decided to stop volunteering. The IRS brought in 2 expert witnesses. Both were actually IRS employees who had received training as professional witnesses. Upon cross-examination by attorney Beecraft, one witness, a Miss I think it's pronounced Jeu, J-E-U, I don't know, Jeu, stated that a secret code known only to IRS and encoded on Mr. Long's permanent record showed that the IRS knew that he was not required to mail or file a return. Mrs. Jia made every effort to avoid this admission, to the point that she was beginning to frustrate the jury. The other witnesses, upon cross-examination by Beecraft, gave testimony that conflicted with the Privacy Act notice. The government also attempted to institute guilt by association in that they claimed Mr. Long had known and relied upon persons of questionable character. They argued that the writers of some of the books he read and people he knew had been convicted of tax-related charges in the past and were in fact criminals. Long responded that just because a person has been convicted of a crime by a court did not invalidate everything said. To illustrate his point, he pointed out the Apostle Paul was a murderer, but that by the grace of God he became the greatest of the apostles. Mr. Long added that he did not rely on anything that he did not personally check out thoroughly. In summation, attorney Larry Beecraft reminded them that Galileo was in prison for holding a belief that conflicted with one which everyone else knew as fact, and that Columbus, acting on a belief which conflicted with what everyone else knew as fact, discovering something no one else thought existed. Now, I have my things about that stuff there in Columbus and all that, but I understand what they're saying. The jury agreed with the defense by finding Mr. Long not guilty. On all counts, they have ventured into history as preservers of freedom. A Chattanooga TV station quoted a government spokesman as saying that this case will change the way the IRS will handle such cases in the future. They indicated that they will be less likely to prosecute if a jury isn't going to decide in their favor. Excuse me. Mr. Long's spirit was best expressed when he was asked for a final statement by a reporter as he was leaving the courtroom. His words, "To God be the glory. Congratulations, Lloyd." I hope that pretty much ends everything I need to talk to you about the income tax. And I'm just going to show you a little bit more and I'm done. Excuse me. This happens every time I talk. Supreme Court cases. I'm not going to read them all. It's a lot. You can go look it up. The internet is one of the greatest inventions in the history of the world, in the fact that you have a library, encyclopedia, everything at your hands. I understand that everything on the internet is not true or correct, whatever. I got all that. But for the most part, there's many things that you can do in the privacy of your home and researching and fighting for the freedom of all peoples around the world. Just showing you. These are all U.S. Supreme Court cases on taxes and the illegality of it. Okay, go look it up. This isn't my stuff. I didn't make it up. Sorry. I know some of you thought I was just talking crap and I don't research and look up cases. There's so many. This starts in 1818 with different things, but I'm not even going to read a lot of it. I mean, just I'm just going to give you a couple of them. Just as I'm looking over, I don't even have this in order in where I want to talk to you about it. Some of it's long. This is the summary. You know, things that were brought out in the case. 1930, Lucas versus Earl. The Supreme Court ruled that wages and compensation for personal services were not to be taxed in their entirety, but instead the gain or profit derived indirectly from them. You've heard that. Let me see. I found this kind of interesting. BOLLW, B-O-L-L-O-W versus Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. All persons in the United States are chargeable with knowledge of the statutes at large. It is well established that anyone who deals with the government assumes the risk that the agent acting in the government's behalf has exceeded the boundaries of his authority. Economy Plumbing and Heating versus U.S. Persons who are not taxpayers are not within the system and can obtain no benefit by following the procedures prescribed for taxpayers, such as the filing of claims for refund. So if you're not in the system, you're not a part of it. It doesn't apply to you. And I'll talk about that later. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to give dead air. I just wanted to read some of these short ones to you. Because some of these cases are very old, but like I said, they still apply. Adams versus New York. The court said that the Fourth Amendment was intended to secure the citizens in person and property against unlawful invasion of the sanctity of his home by officers of the law acting under legislative or judicial sanctions. This protection is equally extended to the action of the government and officers of the law acting under it. Let's see here. Some of these. One of the famous cases back in 1895 was Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company. And it says, prohibits direct taxes on the incomes of individuals. In that case, that was a very famous case that income tax was declared unconstitutional. So that's a real big important case to read. Now, let me just go into some of this. For time's sake. Flint 1911 case, Flint versus Stone Tracy Company. Defined excise taxes as taxes laid on corporations and corporate privileges not in natural persons. Excise are taxes laid upon the manufacture, sale, or consumption of commodities within the country upon license to pursue certain occupations upon corporate privileges. The requirement to pay such taxes involve the exercise of privileges and the element of absolute and unavoidable demand and lacking conceding the power of Congress to tax the business activities of private corporations. I already read to you part of that earlier, but I wanted to make a point on a few of these cases that I personally have went and sat in the law library and looked it up. Because a lot of people sit there and try to tell me, oh, well, here's the case. Here it is. Go look at it for yourself. Go research. I did it. Took me a long time to copy that. It's a really thick booklet of cases. That case. Flint versus Stone Tracy. Here it is in its entirety. Next case that I went and looked up was Brosheber versus Union Pacific Railroad, which was 1916. Here it is. It's a whole case. What was the highlight of that? There's a lot to read, but I'm not going to read it all to you. It established that the 16th Amendment had no effect on the Constitution and that income taxes could only be sustained as excise taxes and not as direct taxes. It goes into a lengthy thing. I'm not going to read it all, but it's here. Go spend some time in the law library. It's free. I mean, you got to pay, to copy that stuff. And here's another one, the last one I'm going to show you that I personally looked up. It's here. It was all in here. I did this years before I found this. This is some new stuff I found kind of on the internet. 1959 case, Flora versus United States, 362 U.S. 145. Rule that our tax system is based on voluntary assessment and payment, not on force or coercion. Our system of taxation is based upon voluntary assessment and payment, not upon distraint. People, research, learn, get in there. Don't be afraid. It's there. I want to show you something. And it's just not that hard in that regard. Like I already told you, I hate this stuff personally. Where is it? So was it this one that I did? I want to show you something in one of these cases. I thought that was it, but I guess it wasn't. It's important to me. I think that was it. Yeah, that was it. I'm missing. I hate eating up airtime like this. So anyway, I'm about to close this out. This is really disturbing to me because I just highlighted it recently, and I know it's in here. So I don't know where it went. I should have had it ready. Oh my gosh, this is weird. Oh, here it is. All right, jeez. Just so you know, this is so people say, well, that didn't say that in that court case. Here it is. It's in the court case. I found it. Okay, it's in there. What? The exact statement of the highlight of the case. Our system of taxation is based upon voluntary assessment and payment, not upon distraint. It's there, guys. It's in these cases. Get out there, research, and look into it. Let me say this to you in the last part of this, and I'm done. And we're going to go into part 6. Let me say this to you. No crimes for individuals. This is something about the taxing and understanding something. Because it's very important. Because people always ask the question, how come you're thrown in jail? How come this? How come that? Let me read why. Since certain individuals are not subject to an income excise tax, they cannot lawfully they cannot lawfully to be subjected. I think there was a misprint here. Let me start over. Since certain individuals are not subject to an income excise tax, they cannot lawfully be subjected to tax-related criminal penalties. All the criminal penalties in the Internal Revenue Codes are contained in Chapter 75, Section 7343 of that chapter. Defines a person who is subject to criminal penalties. An individual is not listed as being a person subject to criminal penalties for failure to file a return, failure to pay income tax, or any other tax law violation. Section 7343 states, the term person as used in this chapter includes an officer or employee of a corporation. And I've already given you the definitions of that employee stuff, all right? And our employee and individual and all that. Or a member or employee of a partnership who as such officer, employee, or member is under a duty to perform the act in respect of which the violation occurs. Only those people who are required to act on behalf of a corporation or partnership are listed as being a person subject to criminal penalties. If an individual is not in that capacity, he is not required to act, and he cannot lawfully be subjected to any criminal penalties under the code. I'm about to run out of time, so I wanna read these other parts to you because it's very important. Now you might ask how citizens are trapped. If these statements are true, how are individuals sent to jail for Internal Revenue Code violations? Sadly, most are convicted by their peers, fellow individuals who do not understand the law. Prosecutors and judges do not discuss long-standing Supreme Court decisions, and jurors generally are not cognizant of the constitutional limitations regarding or relating to taxation, so they frequently vote guilty in tax cases where no crime has actually been committed. If one is not subject to the income excise tax, he or she is not committing a crime by not filing a return or by not paying the tax. People should remember the following important facts. When an individual files an income tax return, he establishes liability to the tax by his own actions of filing a return and voluntarily assessing himself. The voluntary action of filing is considered to be acknowledgement that he is required to file as a taxpayer and that he is therefore subject to the tax. Anyone who admits to being a taxpayer is caught in the trap-like definition of the word code in section 7701A14. The term taxpayer means any person subject to an internal revenue tax. What can we do? The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It was written to create a government of limited powers for the primary purpose of securing citizens' rights to life, liberty, and property. The Declaration of Independence states that it is the duty of citizens to oppose and resist abuse of their rights. These violations of citizens' rights can be stopped if enough people become informed of these facts. Show this information to your friends. Copy the articles. Talk to news companies or news, the news. Try to get the media informed. Call your radio talk shows. The American people must be informed of these facts so that they can take action to restore and preserve their rights. Your labor is your property. Knowledge will give you the power to protect and enjoy all the fruits of your labor. That's about it because it's about to run out. Stay tuned for part 6. That's where I'm going to discuss and teach you and show you how to exempt yourself from taxes from your job and all of that information. I haven't even titled it yet, so whatever it is, but it will be the last part. Thank you.